He was assumed to have committed suicide, although all of his colleagues expressed doubts with that story. And then there's been deaths of 5 microbiologists, as many as 14 world-class microbiologists died between 9/11/01 and March 2nd of '02. January of '02, yet another microbiologist was added to the list. In fact, the official silence on the question of how many so many top experts in infectious disease could die in such a short span of time. And the last I knew, the reported number of microbiologists found dead or murdered were over 100. There's really only one reason to kill off a bunch of scientists: to keep them from doing something they are able to do. What were these scientists able to do? Many blow the whistle if an artificially created disease was about to be used in a manner that those who created it did not approve of. Which I would say could be part of the mystery. And I got huge articles of this up at the website. Microbiologist death toll mounts as connections to dying core, Hadron, promise software, and disease research emerge. And this is just incredible. You can go ahead and check out all this information. Has Professor Wiley Ben disappeared? I mean, I don't have time to get into all this information, especially in these short segments. And this stuff is just out of control, and it needs to be stopped. I mean, the evidence of this is just overwhelming. I mean, this information needs to get out to people.
Here he is, back by popular demand, Stephen Quayle. He investigates bioterrorism. Stephen Quayle, back on Coast to Coast AM. Stephen, how are you?
Good, George. Nice to be with you, and nice to be with the Coast to Coast family. And boy, do we have a lot to talk about.
Whoa, you know what? I was looking at some of the events going on this planet, Stephen. You know, I've got to get his views on all these things that are happening right now. So let's just jump right in. What's new with these dead scientists? And since you and I have been talking about this for years now, what's our count now?
Well, I officially have 84 posted, and there's about 16 that basically we've got to get more confirmation on, but 100. Now, these are the world's leading scientists. And, George, you and I did a story back in 2003 on Dr. David Kelly. I think it was within 24 hours after he'd been found dead. He was the head of the British Ministry of Defence's bioweapons expertise. Yeah. Homicide investigators are saying he is murdered. Now, when I said that on your show, you know, people sent me emails, and you probably got them too, saying, that's just Quayle going off and being a conspiracy theorist. But again, I rest my case, and the thing that this is critical about is that now we have a fake H1N1 virus that's being trumped to the world as the global pandemic. And the global pandemic is interesting in the fact that we haven't even hit any form of mortality rate that's equal to even a bad flu season. The World Health Organization, Center for Disease Control, have both announced that they're not even going to publish deaths. That's because there aren't enough to publish to bring the whole world to its knees. And I think this is critical because as we get into the show tonight, people will understand that there are some H1N1 is not even the issue. How is it that the panic could be so heavy, if you remember, a couple months ago, and then it died down, and now we're all being told, even by the Department of Homeland Security, Napolitano, that she just knows it's going to get bad in the fall. Concurrent with that are all of these sightings of massive military deployment in country of everything from tanks, artillery, airplanes, the word martial law. When we used to talk about that, George, even 6 years ago, people said, again, that's just that conspiracy stuff, until Hank Paulson brought it up last October when the meltdown, the financial meltdown, was being used to blackmail Congress into going along with the bailout plan. So how is it that now we're being told that everybody must have an untested vaccine by a company that's notorious for creating a very, very deadly strain, even having sent 20 million doses of virus out throughout the world, that basically cannot even begin to answer the question, how can you develop a vaccine for a virus that hasn't even gone through its mutagenic nature? In other words, it's too early in the game. The answer to that is, and this is something that people always ask me, so we'll get it right out of the chute, the Illuminati, the globalists, never create a pathogen or any form of weapon in the biological or chemical realm that they don't have the antidote or the vaccine for.
Precisely. They, in many cases, develop that right in tandem.
right. And you tie it in with the chemtrail spraying, and for years and years and years I've been harping that the chemtrails were an initiatory chemical and also biological dusting of the world population, so that when the final phase of global population control came into being, we'd be inoculated with something that would be the pièce de résistance of the bioweaponers' ultimate dream / our ultimate nightmare, and that's the death of 5.5 billion people. Now, that's really hard for people to imagine, but may I read an interesting quote
Yes.
that was given a number of years ago? And this is really important. This is a very, very important quote because it's Dr. Eric Pianka, University of Texas, evolutionary ecologist. War and famine would not do. Instead, disease offered the most efficient and fastest way to kill the billions that must soon die if the population crisis is to be solved. We've got airborne diseases with 90% mortality in humans killing humans. Think about that. You know, the bird flu is good, too. For everyone who survives, he will have to bury 9. But what it basically is laying out is the brightest and the most famous global engineers, from Henry Kissinger, so many people, even President Obama's new science advisor, talking about eugenics. And see, this is the thing I want to get across tonight. The underlying theme of wasting, eliminating, assassinating, murdering all these scientists, these were the men that would have stood in the way of this ultimate attempt to destroy 9/10 of the world's population.
They would have been the experts that people would have turned to for help.
Absolutely.
Well, now back to this vaccine for a moment. The 2,800 people in 8 cities who are going to get this test, and then they're going to go forward in the fall with 160 million vaccines for
Correct.
whatever they develop. How can they work that fast?
Well, that's the idea. They can't unless it was already in the making. You see, this whole thing is orchestrated. You can see it from the murder of the scientists. You can see it from the appropriations. You can see it in the black budget. Anyone who's doing independent investigation, there are so many amazing articles, and by the most famous living, emphasis for how long, living scientists out there saying, do not take it, do not take it. Now, does it make any sense to tell people not to take it? If there is a global plan, and if you are convinced that something is amiss and things are strange in this country, then you've got to say, how come this thing is so premeditated and pre-orchestrated, and what is the ultimate outcome? There is going to be mandatory vaccination. It doesn't matter what people say. I don't believe it. Go to the WHO documents, the Model Health Emergency
Powers Act that we talked about years ago.
You and I, remember, we did a show on that, or we did a large segment of a show on that. Well, interestingly enough, in the last couple of days, it's also come out that it is under United Nations control. Now, this is something that most people should have a little bit of frosting on their cake over. Why would you, as an American citizen, be subject to United Nations, World Health Organization, their command structure in the case of a global pandemic, which they've moved us to 6, yet if there's nobody dying from it? Well, the only answer to that is you have to go to the global and United Nations population agenda and their population control agenda, and that's what it all boils down to.
The Model State Emergency Health Powers Act, which they passed years ago, is used when a town or state is faced with a pandemic situation.
Absolutely.
And there it is.
And then again, I posted a story, you probably saw it, refusing vaccination labels you a criminal, so says the World Health Organization. And this is kind of a critical critical information that people need to recognize. And I think it's important that under the Model Emergency Health Powers Act, this all affects the economy, which I'm going to get to just really quick. It will be a criminal offense for Americans to refuse a vaccine. Police are allowed to use deadly
or
force.
They'll quarantine you. Take you away.
And quarantine, they'll take you away. And it's not going to be a pretty picture, and I think that's what people have got to understand. Signs are there. The point is what is the event? See, that's the issue. Is it strictly the vaccination and by the way, H1N1, not the issue. What I'm talking about is a biological cocktail, most likely something Ebola/Spanish flu, because they'll claim at some point that this thing has gotten out of hand and it's mutated. When they design a bioweapon, I wrote the book Breathe No Evil.
Okay, but that's not being done with these 2,800 tests, right?
No, the 2,800 tests are basically a placebo to assuage the public fears. The thing that I think has got to be important, you have to factor in this. You've got, again, the dead scientists we've talked about. You've got the plan for population control. And then you've got the local law enforcement feeling very nervous. And again, a lot of them, I don't know how many you talk to, but they'll come right out and tell you they're coming to take the guns. Some people say, well, they're going to use a vaccine. And by the way, under the World Health Organization, you do not have a choice to resist, okay? Whether they shoot you in the arm or shoot you in the head, either way, you end up dead.
So you're saying that this vaccine, this test, they're just giving them basically nothing, the placebo, and then they'll say, hey, nobody got hurt, nobody died from the test, so you can take it.
You got it.